Java 22 released a new feature with the name Unnamed Variables and Patterns. Inside this video, let's try to explore what is this new feature, why it has been introduced, and under which scenarios we need to use this new enhancement. Many times inside our Java code, we end up writing lot many unused local variables, and deleting these unused local variables may not be an option because we'll have some tricky scenarios where we can't delete these unused variables from our code just because Java syntax forcing us defining them, or there might be some dependency on these unused variables inside our business logic as a side effect. So in these kind of scenarios where deleting an unused variable is not an option, we can simply use the unnamed variable. So your unused variable name can be anything. The name can be replaced with underscore symbol. So that's a simple purpose or explanation about these unnamed variables. So what do we get by using these unnamed variables and patterns? Developers no more they have to worry about giving some names to the unused variables. Many times we scratch our head what name we should give to this unused variable name. Can I give temp, or I can give some X or Y? So this kind of thought process we don't have to go because all these unused variable names which we can't delete can be replaced with an unnamed variable which is underscore. On top of that, we also have one more advantage, which is many times IDEs like IntelliJ or Eclipse and static code analyzers like SonarQube, they will always complain about there is an unused variable inside our code. But we know we can't delete them because there are some tricky scenarios which we are going to discuss in few minutes. So all these false positive alarms by the IDEs and SonarQube can be resolved with the help of unnamed variable. So whenever we are using unnamed variable, we are indirectly telling to IDEs and static code analyzers saying that I know it is an unused variable, but I have some dependency on it, or I have to declare it just because Java syntax expect that. So this kind of communication we can give to the tools so that they no more going to throw any warnings. So on a high level, if someone asks you what is an unnamed value and pattern, just tell them it is introduced as part of Java 22. All the unused local variable names and pattern variable names can be replaced with a symbol called underscore. So this is the simplest definition that you can give, but it is important to note that these unnamed variables and patterns cannot be applied to the instance fields or class level fields like static fields or instance fields that you're going to create inside your class body. On top of that, these unnamed variables cannot be passed to the methods. So these are the limitations. I know you may have $1 million question, which is what are the scenarios where we can use these unnamed variables? What are those tricky scenarios where I can't delete an unused variable? So these kind of questions might be running behind the scenes. So let's try to answer those. You can see here, I have a static method. The purpose of this method is it is going to count the number of words available inside the input that it has received in the form of iterable. You can see here inside this method, we have a for loop. Here we're just iterating the words, and this word, which is a temporary variable, it is unused variable. We are nowhere using inside our business logic. Does that mean we can delete this word? Of course, we can't delete because Java expects to define a variable name as a syntax. So in these kind of scenarios, we can simply leverage the unnamed variable. Like you can see here, I rewrite the same method with the unnamed variable. Just in the place of word, I'm trying to use the underscore. With this, I will be able to clearly communicate to the other developers that there is an unused variable inside my code. Don't delete that because I have some dependency inside my code, and it is also an indication to my IDE and SonarQube to not throw any warning on the unused variable. I hope this is clear to you. Let me write some code and show this new enhancement in action. To explain you about the unnamed variables, I have created a Java project, and inside this Java project, I also created a Java class with the name unnamed variables. I'm going to upload this code into the GitHub repo. The link of the GitHub repo I'm going to mention as part of the video description. Since you are already an expert of Java, and since we are exploring the new feature unnamed variables, what I have done is I have written a good amount of code behind the scenes, and using this code, I'm going to show you all the possible scenarios where you will end up using unused variables, but you can't delete them. So in all those scenarios, using the unnamed variables is going to be a good option. So just to save some time of yours, I built this logic behind the scenes. I hope you're fine. So let's try to understand this code. Like you can see here, we have a class with the name unnamed variables, and inside this class, we have a main method. So inside this main method, first we have a scenario 1. So inside this scenario 1, first you can see with the help of this line, we are trying to create a list object, and inside this list object, we have various fruit names like apple, banana, orange, grape, and kiwi. So this list object, I'm trying to send as an input to the count words method. So let's try to open this method, which is present inside the same class. So you can see here, this method is accepting the input in the form of iterable. But from the main method, we are trying to send the input in the form of list object. But still, Java is not complaining anything, because if you try to open this list is extending sequence to collection, and this sequence to collection extending the collection, and this collection is extending the iterable. So since list is a child of iterable, the Java is not throwing any compilation errors. As a next step, let's go to this method one more time. And inside this method, you can see the business logic that I have written is just to iterate all the elements present inside these input words. And during the each iteration, I'm trying to increment the variable which is total words. Once this for each block is executed, at the end, we are going to return the total words as an output from this method. So if you try to closely observe this logic, you can see I have an unused variable. There is a culprit here. The variable name is word. Can I delete this? Of course, I can't delete this, because the Java expects a syntax that we need to follow whenever we are using the for each block. So that's why deleting the unused variable is not an option. So this is one type of typical scenario that you may end up having unused variables which you can't delete them from your code. And at the same time, you can see my IntelliJ IDEA, it is throwing a warning saying that parameter word is never used. It is giving a recommendation saying that rename word to underscore. So this variable name, I can simply replace with the unnamed variable which is underscore. With that, you can see I no more have any warnings, and at the same time my code also looking good. So any developer who is aware about the unnamed variables, it's pretty easy for them to understand that I have an unnamed variable, and they should not try to update this business logic by leveraging this unnamed variable, because they can't use this anyway inside the for each block. So with this, we are also having an advantage, which is it is going to improve the readability of my code. Please make sure you are having the latest IntelliJ IDEA downloaded with support JDK 22. As of now, I'm using the IntelliJ IDEA 2024 version. So this version supports the JDK 22. So behind the scenes, I downloaded the JDK 22 and I configured the same JDK 22 as a Java version for this project. That's why I'm not getting any compilation error. If you try to use these unnamed variable syntax, which is underscore with the previous versions of Java, then obviously you're going to get a compilation error. I hope you're clear with this scenario 1. Now let's go to the main method. So here we are catching the total words as an output and we are trying to print the same. Now moving on to the scenario 2, I have a list with the name fruits. Inside this list, we also have some fruit names like apple, banana, and orange. Now using this fruits list object, I'm trying to invoke the stream method so that I can process the elements present inside this list object. Post opening the stream, I'm trying to invoke one of the terminal operations supported by the Stream API, which is collect. To this collect, I'm trying to pass the code, which is collectors.toMap. So what is this toMap it is going to do? To this toMap, we are going to pass a lambda expression on how to build a map based upon the lambda expressions that we have provided. So the very first lambda expression that we have here, it is going to be used to build the key values, whereas the second lambda expression, it is going to be used to build the value inside the map. So to build the keys, we're trying to use the element inside the stream, which is fruit name. So that's why I'm trying to give the variable name as f. So the same fruit name I'm trying to assign as a key inside my map. But coming to the value, I'm trying to hard code a value which is fruit. So for all the key names like apple, banana, and orange, I'm going to have a same value which is fruit. So if you see that tricky scenario here, this v is an unused variable inside my lambda expression. Nowhere inside my lambda expression I'm using this v. So this v also can be replaced with the unnamed variable which is underscore. You can see the warning also resolve. And at last I'm trying to display the fruit map onto the console. So let me try to execute this program so that we can see the output of this scenario 1 and scenario 2. So if I try to execute this program in a debug mode, you'll be able to see the output from the scenario 1 is 5, which is the total count of the elements present inside the list object. Whereas the scenario 2 output is a map which has keys like banana, orange, apple, and the value for all these keys is fruit. Because inside our business logic, we are trying to populate the same value for all the map keys. So here you can see I'm trying to use the unnamed variables, and with this, my code is going to looks good and it is also going to have better readability. It is not going to have any warnings, and it is also going to give some information to other developers that this is an unused variable. So don't try to delete these or don't try to use this inside the business logic because that may change the overall output. So this kind of heads up we are going to give to the other developers who are going to work on your code in future. So we saw the scenario of lambda expression also. Now moving on to the scenario 3, I have a method which is convert and display. So let me open the same. So inside this method, we have a simple logic which is we are going to accept and string input. The same string data we're trying to parse and convert into a int variable. So if the parsing is going to be successful, we are going to return the output as true. Otherwise, if we end up having an exception like number format exception and any other kind of exception, we are going to return the false as an output. So inside this method also you can see we are not using the output from the parse int method. Maybe the intention of the developer is the developer simply want to understand if the string holds a proper int value or not. To handle this scenario, the developer has written this code. Since this is a unused variable, I can replace this with underscore, or I can also delete these entire unused variables. And this is an acceptable solution in this scenario because in Java, catching the return type is optional, but this code is not going to look good. So to improve the readability, I'm going to bring back my unused variable, but to resolve this warning related to unused variable, I'm going to use the unnamed variable syntax, which is underscore. Now inside these catch blocks also, there is an unused variable like ex, which is the variable name for this number format exception. And for this exception, we are nowhere using these variables inside the catch block. We're just trying to print out some statement and return a is valid as false. Of course, this is not a production standard code. In production standard code, we're going to use the loggers instead of system.out.println. In these kind of scenarios also, we can use the unnamed variables to improve the readability of the code. We can see nowhere we are getting the compilation error. But if you are having the thoughts of removing the entire underscore and simply mentioning the number format exception, then we are going to get a compilation error because inside Java, we have a syntax that needs to follow whenever we are defining a catch block. So that's why we can't completely get rid of this unused variable. So what is the perfect solution here? The perfect solution is to use the unnamed variable syntax. I hope you're clear with this scenario 3. Now let me go back to the main method. Inside the scenario 4, we are going to explore a method which is execute if file present. So there is a method inside the class which is going to execute some piece of logic if there is a file is present in a given path. In this kind of scenario, to check if a given file is present inside the given path or not, I'm trying to use a try with resource syntax. Inside the try with resource, I'm trying to create an object of buffer reader. And to this object of buffer reader, I'm trying to pass the object of file reader along with the file path. So if there is no file available with this name, then obviously I'm going to get an exception which is file not found exception. And with that, the logic present inside the try block is not going to be executed. So here the intentions of the developer is good, but the developer end up creating an unused variable which he can't delete. So to resolve this issue, here also we can use an unnamed variable syntax. And inside the catch blocks here also, we are nowhere using these variables like file not found exception and IO exception inside the catch block. So here also we can use the underscore to improve the readability of the code. So let me execute this program and see the output. You can see we are getting a file not found exception as an output because there is no file inside my system with this name. That's why straight away this catch block is getting executed, due to which we are seeing this message on the console. I hope you are clear with this scenario as well. Let me go back to the main method. Inside this scenario, I'm going to show you on how to use the unnamed variables as part of the records. You can see I have a class with the name point. If you can click on this, I have a record declaration with the name point inside the same class. So what is record inside Java? Record is a new enhancement introduced inside Java that is going to help you to create an final class which is capable of creating immutable objects. So this piece of code behind the scenes, it is going to create a final class with the name point, and this point class is capable of storing couple of variables which is x and y. So using this point, I'm trying to create an object. You can see with the help of new operator and invoking the constructor, I'm trying to pass 7 and 3. 7 indicates what is the x coordinate and 3 indicates what is the y coordinate. So based upon this point object, I have written an if block. So inside the if block, I have a condition which is if point variable is an instance of point class, then execute this piece of code. Inside the if block, I'm trying to print a statement which is point object with the value of x. So here I'm not using the y variable. So in this scenario also, I can remove this y, which is an unused variable inside this if block, and replace this with the unnamed pattern. So if I select this option, you can see I'm getting underscore. But here you can see the entire parameter is replaced. We can either mention int underscore or we can simply mention underscore. So here, though we're not mentioning int, still it is working because my compiler, it has a context about the second parameter which is int y based upon the declaration that we have done here. So that's why compiler is not going to complain anything in this scenario. So this is another flavor of unnamed variables. In total, we discussed about 5 different scenarios. So these are the typical scenarios that you may face on your day-to-day coding. Feel free to use the unnamed variables if you are using the JDK 22 version. As of now, we discussed everything about the unnamed variables. Apart from unnamed variables, we also have unnamed patterns also introduced as part of Java 22. So let's try to understand what are these unnamed patterns. For the same, I have created a vehicle interface. You can see I have created a sealed interface with the name vehicle, which will allow implementing only for the subclasses car, bike, and truck. So these classes also I declared inside the same interface. So each of the subclass, they are going to implement the interface vehicle, and inside this bike, I have a variable with the name brand, and there is a constructor and there is a getter method which will return me a brand. Similarly, under car, I have a variable name with the name model. Using the same model variable, we have a constructor and we have a getter method. And similarly, we have a truck subclass which is implementing vehicle, and it has an instance variable with the name manufacturer. So these are the few subclasses and interfaces that I have created for our demo purpose. Now let me open another class I have here. So the class name is unnamed patterns. So inside this class, we can go to the main method in few seconds. But before that, we have various other static methods like process car, process bike, process truck. All these static methods, they're going to accept the input parameter in the form of parent data type, which is vehicle. So inside these methods, I'm going to check if the given input is an instance of car, then I'm going to execute this method, which is processing car model, and to this message, I'm going to append the value I have inside the model variable. Coming to the process bike, if it is a bike, we are going to invoke the get brand method. If it is a truck, we are going to invoke the get manufacturer method. So these are the some static methods that we have inside our class. Now let's go to our main hero, which is main method. So inside the main method, I'm trying to create an object of truck by passing the manufacturer name as Toyota. On the left hand side, you can see I'm trying to catch the object with the help of the interface data type. Now here comes the main logic, which is related to the unnamed patterns. So here you can see I have a switch statement. We call this kind of switch syntax as switch expression. Using the switch expression, I have written some logic, which is if the vehicle is of type car, I want to invoke this method, which is process car vehicle. Whereas if the vehicle is of type bike, I want to invoke this method. Whereas if the vehicle is of type truck, I want to invoke this method. So here I have a local variable, which is vehicle. The same local variable I'm trying to use inside a switch expression. So whenever we use local variables as part of switch expression, we can call them as type patterns, because this local variable helping my switch expression to identify what is the type of the object, like whether it is a car or a bike or a truck. I hope you're clear what is a type pattern. Now coming to the unnamed pattern, inside this switch expression, you can see I have created a variable which is car, bike, and truck. Nowhere inside my business logic I'm using these variables, which in other words we can call them as type patterns. So in these kind of scenarios also, we can use the underscore symbol, but here we should not call them as unnamed variables. We should call them as unnamed patterns. So let me replace all these type patterns with the unnamed patterns. So with this, I'm assuming you're clear on what is unnamed pattern. So let me execute this program, and you can see we are getting the output, which is processing truck manufacturer Toyota. I hope you're clear about what are unnamed variables and unnamed patterns that are introduced as part of Java 22. If you have any questions, please refer to the code that we have discussed so far inside this video. All the code that we have discussed so far inside this video, you can find it inside the GitHub repo. Thank you. Bye.